Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moments. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of upcoming episode of Tales of Herding Gods based on novel. So let's start. After the commotion, Sunshot Divine Cannon stopped for a moment as they prepared to return to the capital. Emperor Yangfeng summoned Cai Yunxiang then, his face instantly sinking. He sneered at her, "Little saintess of Cai family, your cult master told you to say that. Why doesn't he dare to come to meet me?" Cult Master used Human Emperor's seal to summon the heroes from all parts of the country to defend against the invasion of High Heavens, holding them outside God-broken mountain range, preventing the enemies from invading, protecting the safety of eternal peace. All right, no need to talk officiously. Emperor Yangfeng sighed. I know he put in much effort and has high achievements. It's also because of him this time that eternal peace wasn't wiped out and all of its people killed. I don't have any intention to blame him. Furthermore, he also saved my face by letting you come here. How did he subdue Baishi of High Heavens? By making threats and promises, showing the enemy his weak, using hundreds of different methods. Cai Yunxiang told him how Qin Mu had subdued God Baishi, and Emperor Yangfeng was stunned. Minister Qin helped eternal peace subdue two gods at such a young age, forcing them to guard mountains and rivers. With these kinds of things, even I am inferior. I was worried about the battle at God-broken mountain range, so I had ordered people to head to investigate, and there is already news. Cai Yunxiang's heart tightened when Emperor Yangfeng said, General of the Borders said that there are continuous earthquakes along some 20,000 miles of God-broken mountain range. All the mountains had sunk, and the earthquakes have raised fog and darkness which is invading the God-broken mountains. Ghost gods can be seen in the fog, but no traces of Imperial Preceptor and the rest could be found. I want to go over to see it personally, but the politics can't be messed up. The Empire also can't be messed up. General of the Borders said that the place has signs of becoming part of Great Ruins. They are currently invading eternal peace. A private worry took root in Cai Yunxiang, and she looked toward the west. Cult Master is currently heading there. What exactly is happening there for Great Ruins to start expanding? Qin Mu rode the dragon until it was evening and they finally came to the surroundings of God-broken mountain range. He raised his head to look at it, and his heart suddenly jumped. He could only see grey fog covering the place in layer after layer. When the sun set in the west, it was soon drowned out. Something is wrong. God-broken mountain range was very long and the width of the mountains was also very great. The mountain range separated Great Ruins and eternal peace, taking up 100 miles. Now it had sunk down, or replaced it was thick grey fog. Dull tremors came from it from time to time. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor activated Earthquake Cauldron and broke this piece of mountain range, sinking the mountains down into the ground. Qin Mu could sense the tremors from the grey fog and a bad feeling arose in his heart. Since Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor had used Earthquake Cauldron, it showed that he'd felt powerless to defend himself. He then didn't hesitate to take all of them down with him just to block them from crossing over God-broken mountains. When the sun set, darkness invaded from the west, and it was like a black flood had covered the sky, swallowing everything on the way. Every place it passed by vanished without a trace. The darkness seemed to have substance and actually came to God-broken mountain range, drowning it. The darkness flooded to the front of Qin Mu's face before suddenly stopping. Qin Mu raised his head and saw that the darkness was like a straight cliff whose top couldn't be seen. It separated the night of eternal peace from that of his home. Great Ruins has swallowed God-broken mountain range and spread toward Eternal Peace Empire. The darkness just swallowed up 100 miles. Qin Mu bent over and took out a flag to stab it where the darkness of Great Ruins touched the night of eternal peace. He said in a low voice, in a few more days, we will know if the darkness is truly spreading or it has stopped. If the darkness of Great Ruins is expanding, it would probably be a catastrophic disaster to Eternal Peace Empire. Divine Flood Dragon King, let's go in. Divine Flood Dragon King acknowledged and transformed into the youth. Divine light shone around his body, and he brought Qin Mu and the dragon Chelin into the ruins of God-broken mountain range. Flood dragons, come onto me. Qin Mu gave a low shout and executed secrets of dragon control. The flood dragons flew toward him and coiled around his body. Two of them hung themselves from his ears like earrings. Instantly, the magic power of the flood dragons fused with his, causing Qin Mu's abilities to soar frantically. 9 heavens, awaken! Formation markings swirled in Qin Mu's eyes, and he opened his 9 heavens eyes. Divine light shot out from his eyes and through the darkness. Wherever his gaze passed, it was like a light hole had pierced the darkness and the grey fog. The divine flood dragon king didn't have such an ability and was pretty envious. Qin Mu let him follow close to him as they slowly went deeper into the ruins of God-broken mountains. Suddenly, Qin Mu stopped, and the divine flood dragon king also did so. What they saw in front of them were pieces of a tattered painting floating past silently. It was Death's painting, but the things within it had already shattered. Something seemed to have jumped out of it, tearing it apart. However, there was still a remnant of terrifying power within it. If they accidentally touched it, they would face great danger. Qin Mu avoided the painting and started walking again. He then suddenly stopped once more, for he saw hundreds of tattered paintings of all sizes floating silently in the grey fog. There were also chunks of large mountain rocks mixed among them. Qin Mu frowned. They should be in Death's battlefield, since he was skilled in painting. His world in painting had thousands of different sites that were grand and magnificent. Even experts like Xing'an would be sealed if they weren't careful and find it difficult to break free. For Death to have so many tattered paintings at this place, one could imagine how fierce the battle had been. Your Majesty, be careful. The divine flood dragon hurriedly jumped in front of Qin Mu, defending him. Don't touch these rocks. They contain a god's aura and has their divine arts left inside. Qin Mu hurriedly pulled away, but then he saw a huge body slowly moving in the darkness and grey fog. It was walking over to them. They saw that the body was indomitable when it got closer to them. They could only see an incomparably thick leg obstructing their vision, but no upper body. Qin Mu raised his head and shone the divine light from his eyes upwards to gradually see a wide chest high above them. Looking upwards some more, he saw an imposing face of a god. A stone statue. Qin Mu's scalp crawled. A stone statue was walking in the darkness and the grey fog. The divine flood dragon king also felt his blood running cold. In front of them was an incomparably tall and sturdy stone statue whose size was beyond their imagination. Not only that, that stone statue was even walking in the darkness. Maha! The flood dragons on Qin Mu's body were frightened and pulled back their heads. Don't cry. The dragon Chilin's face was ashen as he spoke softly. If you wake him up, he will ride you to kill people. I was ridden the whole night. Suddenly, the stone statue bent down as if having heard something. A huge face pushed through the darkness and appeared in front of Qin Mu and the rest. Hu Linga rolled her eyes and collapsed on the floor as though she had fainted. Her legs were held upward stiffly while her tail was straight. When the flood dragons and the dragon Qilin saw the situation, they immediately learned from her example and lay down on the ground to play dead. Young master, Hu Linga squinted her eyes and poked Qin Mu. Qin Mu hesitated for a moment before collapsing on his back and sticking out his tongue. His body was stiff, his face black, making it look like he had died very miserably. When the divine flood dragon king saw Qin Mu also lying on the floor and acting dead, he was at a loss. He was a god, the divine flood dragon king, the esteemed god of the flood dragons, so how could he escape from trouble by shamelessly playing dead like Hu Linga and the rest? Thump! The divine flood dragon king collapsed onto the floor, his limbs distorting. His death seemed to be even more miserable than that of Qin Mu, which made it evident it wasn't his first time playing dead. The huge head came down, but its eyes seemed to be bad. The giant face literally brushed across everyone's bodies as they held their breaths and remained motionless. Ish! The stone statue let out a long hiss before slowly straightening up to walk into the darkness. The thumping footsteps gradually went away. This stone statue seems to be looking for something. Qin Mu jumped up and pondered over it. Where did it come from? Great ruins? Or another world? What is it looking for? Hulinga and all of the flood dragons crawled up while the divine flood dragon king patted the dust off his body. Hulinga praised him, "Divine flood dragon king, among all of us, you're the best at playing dead. You must have practiced it many times. When you are free, you must teach me more." The divine flood dragon king's face flushed and he muttered, "I did not, don't talk nonsense. Playing dead is all about talent." Qin Mu walked away while saying, "Let's continue our search. Everyone be careful, since we don't know if there are other stone statues here." Divine Flood Dragon King, what's your opinion of the one we saw earlier? The Divine Flood Dragon King thought for a moment before saying, "That stone statue is most likely not from Great Ruins." Qin Mu was slightly stunned. "Not from Great Ruins? Why do you say so?" The stone statues in Great Ruins brave the wind and rain, frost and cold, so all of them are very old and worn down. But this stone statue was quite clean and fresh, as though it had just become a stone statue. But the Divine Flood Dragon King couldn't be sure. However, there are also stone statues in Great Ruins that are most peculiar, so it could be one which hides in some sealed space where the elements cannot reach it. Qin Mu muttered to himself irresolutely as he pondered over it. Could there have been numerous stone statues hidden under God-broken mountain range? When it was destroyed, could they have risen up? "It's a possibility," the Divine Flood Dragon King said. "Your Majesty, dragon-rearing sovereign had once said that the origin of God-broken mountain range was very fishy. It surrounded Great Ruins, separating it an eternal peace. Great Ruins was in a piece of chaos, yet it was peaceful outside it, so there definitely had to be something wrong with God-broken mountain range." As they entered deeper into the strange place, the grey fog and the darkness grew thicker and thicker. The air was filled with a dullness that could make one go crazy, and from time to time, trembling from earthquake cauldron would come from afar. Qin Mu headed toward the tremors, and not long after, they encountered a second stone statue. It also seemed to be searching for something. Divine Flood Dragon King's words make sense. Qin Mu avoided the stone statue and thought to himself, "These stone statues are most likely from under the God-broken mountain range." A mountain range being able to hold back the peculiarity of Great Ruins was strange by itself. On what did it rely on to block the darkness of Great Ruins? Since Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor had used Earthquake Cauldron to shatter God-broken mountain range, the darkness of Great Ruins had expanded by 100 miles. Just from this point, it could be seen that God-broken mountain range had really possessed the ability to block the darkness. The mountain range should have appeared after founding Emperor Empire was wiped out and become Great Ruins. Qin Mu had once heard people saying that some god had created God-broken mountain range to separate Eternal Peace and Great Ruins and prevent people from Great Ruins to come in. When they created the mountains, they reached Mount Meru's area, but because there was someone on top of Great Thunderclap Monastery, they took a detour. It couldn't be said for sure, but the god who had created the mountain range might have also buried numerous stone statues underneath it. "Young master, could this stone statue be one of those that popped up in Eternal Peace Empire?" Hulinga asked. As Qin Mu froze, stunned, she added, "It might be the god statues from near God-broken mountain range. Because many gods of high heavens and other strong practitioners had died here, the stone statues could use them as sacrificial offerings to come back to life. However, because the sacrifices weren't enough, they couldn't revive completely and can only move around." "There's this possibility as well," Qin Mu said with some suspicion. "If that's the case, what are the stone statues looking for?" "Of course it's the earthquake cauldron that shattered God-broken mountain range," Hulinga said as though it was expected. "Earthquake cauldron is their weapon and they need to find it to release all of its power. Although Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor shattered God-broken mountain range, he definitely didn't release everything that was inside the cauldron. Linga is really smart," Qin Mu praised. The little fox was proud of herself. "It's just that since the stone statues can move, why don't they look for other meteorological weapons?" Qin Mu shook his head. "Finding other weapons would be much easier. On top of that, this place is still trembling, so it's evident that Earthquake Cauldron is still releasing its power continuously. With that, it shouldn't be too difficult for the stone statues to find it from the direction of the tremors. Because of that, what you guessed should be wrong." Divine Flood Dragon King's guess is more logical. Hu Ling's proudness vanished without a trace. Suddenly, Qin Mu stopped and collapsed to the floor to play dead again. Incomparably heavy footsteps came from in front of them as a tall stone statue walked toward them. Qin Mu narrowed his eyes and saw that the back of that stone statue was filled with flags. They had also petrified, but there was a huge eye on each and every flag, which looked very strange. Lumps of black qi poured into the flags behind the stone statue. With it, one of the eyes on a flag gradually transformed from rock into flesh and blood. The eye slowly became a true eye. It rolled around in the flag, looking very rough. It was obvious that the energy wasn't enough for it to completely break free of its petrified state. Devil Eye? The stone statue is a devil. Qin Mu's scalp crawled and he almost jumped up. Since it was a devil, it definitely couldn't be a stone statue from under God-broken mountain range. What walked in great ruins in the darkness were the monsters of the devil race. They weren't afraid of the strangeness because they were the peculiarity themselves. Qin Mu once met a devil god in the darkness, and he had lured them forward, making him mistake the outskirts of Fengdu as carefree village. Village chief had even fought with him. That's not right. If these stone statues are devil gods, why did they become stone statues? The devil gods I saw in the past were all full of vigor. All kinds of thoughts jumped around in his head, and he suddenly thought of a possibility. The world of the stone statues wasn't the one overlapping with great ruins and eternal peace. They weren't the devil gods from great ruins, but had come from another world. Because they traversed into another world, their corporeal bodies turned into stone and their power still remained outside. What exactly is going on in this place? Qin Mu's mind was groggy. At night in great ruins, there were 3 to 5 different worlds, but now that God-broken mountain range had crumbled, a new world had shown up. Is that new world going to overlap with eternal peace? Why did such an unimaginable thing happen? Just as he thought this far, the devil eye on the flag rolled to survey the surroundings. Suddenly, its gaze landed on Qin Mu and the rest who were playing dead on the ground, and playfulness appeared in it. Fear struck Qin Mu's heart. The flag suddenly fell off the back of the stone statue and landed right in front of them. Qin Mu abandoned his plans to play dead and immediately rose while shouting, "Divine Flood Dragon King!" The Divine Flood Dragon King instantly transformed back into his original form when he heard him. Qin Mu brought Hu Ling to jump onto it while the dragon Qilin led the other flood dragons to climb up the dragon's back. The Divine Flood Dragon then whooshed and rushed away. Behind them, the stone statue turned around and its hand slammed down at an extremely fast speed. The Divine Flood Dragon King roared, and all his vital chi exploded, turning into a torrenting flood. It transformed into a long river which quickly coiled around the arm of the stone statue, trying to crush it. The arm of that stone statue bent and straightened, and with that, the divine out of the Divine Flood Dragon King was shattered. He felt his blood run cold and shouted, "Your Majesty, it's a true god. It should be a true devil." Qin Mu corrected him. The stone statue raised its feet and caught up to them in a few steps. The other hand came slamming down, and the Divine Flood Dragon King avoided the strike. In the meantime, the flag soared into the sky before landed on the ground. The devil eye on it continued to stare at the group. When the Divine Flood Dragon King escaped a certain distance away, the petrified flag would soar up once again and land close to them. It was like a hopping flag. The stone statue is relying on that eye to see. Without it, the devil god won't be able to locate us. Qin Mu instantly came to a realization and took out Sun Jade Eye from his Dao Tai sack. He immediately placed it eye on the dragon's back and activated it without a word. Mum. A beam of Sun Divine Ray tore apart the darkness and the fog, slicing at the eye on the flag. A black ray instantly shot out from the devil eye as well, blocking the Sun Divine Ray. Qin Mu grabbed Moon Jade Eye with his other hand and adjusted its direction. A thin light blade shot out from Moon Jade Eye, and wherever it passed by, space would literally solidify into substance. The rays from one eye and a moon instantly tore apart the black ray from the devil eye and shattered the eye. The petrified flag was left with only a broken hole. Using Moon Jedi and Sun Jedi together seems to result in an even greater power. Qin Mu suppressed the astonishment in his heart and raised his head to look at the stone statue. Its movement suddenly stopped, and it tilted its ears as though it was trying to hear something. "Don't move," Qin Mu whispered under his breath. The Divine Flood Dragon King immediately stopped, and Qin Mu said softly, "Slowly walk, don't hurry." The Divine Flood Dragon King slowly crept forward in fear of making any sound while Qin Mu stared intensely at the stone statue. It seemed to be looking around, smashing here and kicking there, but it didn't notice them. Suddenly, the Divine Flood Dragon King's body paused and he said in a trembling voice, "Your Majesty, continue walking." Qin Mu didn't turn back his head. "Your Majesty, look ahead," the Divine Flood Dragon King croaked. Hu Linger's voice was also trembling. "Young Master, look ahead." "Ahead?" Qin Mu was slightly stunned and turned back to look before them. As his eyes caught sight of what the others were referring to, he couldn't help staring blankly, all his sense having flown out. Behind them, the stone statue pummeled everything and shattered the whole place, slowly closing in on them. Yet Qin Mu seemed to feel nothing. After some time, he muttered, "Imperial Preceptor, what have you done?" In front of them, the sky and the land seemed to be connected together. The already strange sight was made even more shocking by a huge hole blown between them. It was difficult to describe it since the sky was empty before, so how could a hole be blown through it? The land was incomparably thick. It couldn't be penetrated even if a huge hole had been drilled through it, which presented another kind of inconceivable and impressive sight. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor had to have used Earthquake Cauldron at the crucial moment, borrowing the divine art of the meteorological weapon to pierce through the land and the sky of this world and another world, creating the magnificent sight of the two coming together. Furthermore, the power of Earthquake Cauldron was extremely great, to the extent that the wound between two worlds still hadn't recovered. The barriers of the two worlds couldn't heal themselves. In front of the huge hole, great ruins and eternal peace were at night, while behind the hole, there was a sun rising, shining on a black and tall devil castle. The sky of the other world was situated under the horizon of God-Broken Mountain Range, while the land was in the sky above God-Broken Mountain Range. From Qin Mu's angle, he could see the land of that world, and there were all kinds of sharp buildings which looked like long knives, long swords, and spears. Those buildings were 10,000 feet tall and were built with great denseness. It was a completely different style of construction compared to that in Eternal Peace. Grand and sinister devil castles were situated up and down huge mountains extending without end into the distance. Some of them were even floating in the sky. Sunlight shone on them, casting shadows on God-Broken Mountain Range. The trees and mountains of that world had abnormal shapes. They were twisted and terrifying. Sunlight from the other world shone over from the ground and hit the bodies of Qin Mu and the rest. Standing in front of the incomparably huge circular hole, they were miniature-like ants. The sunlight from the other world lengthened their shadows, but compared to the hole, the shadows were incomparably fine. Under their feet was the sun and the land was above their heads. It was like they were standing in front of a mirror which reflected things upside down. On top of that, the hole was still trembling gently, making the rocks in the surroundings of God-Broken Mountain Range rise in the air from the continuous shakes. The bodies of Qin Mu and the rest turned numb from the tremors, and their primordial spirits grew unstable. One could only imagine what terrifying energy had been unleashed when Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor had used Earthquake Cauldron. The earthquakes here are coming from the hole. It isn't Imperial Preceptor who's still using Earthquake Cauldron. Qin Mu's heart sank. After going into God-Broken Mountain Range, he sensed tremors from time to time and thought that Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was still using Earthquake Cauldron. Never did he expect them to be coming from the hole that connected two worlds. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor wasn't there, and his life and death were unknown. Qin Mu raised his head and looked at the land floating in the sky. A powerful devil god stood there, sending out his primordial spirit as his corporeal body petrified. There were numerous strangely shaped devils that were like hard-working ants surrounding the devil god's petrified body to construct a large sacrificial altar. Tens of thousands of slaves were led up them to be executed, creating the blood sacrifice to send the devil god's stone statue over. A wizard wearing white bones and feathers on his head was casting a spell on the large sacrificial altar. The sight of blood flowing around it was captured in the eyes of Qin Mu and the rest. It was a kind of cruel beauty. The sight was shocking, cruel, and terrifying. That world was still in a barbaric and bloody era. Their divine arts were very primitive and reeked of blood. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor can be said to have brought huge trouble. Qin Mu's scalp crawled. Earthquake Cauldron had opened a passageway to another world, and there seemed to be numerous devil gods in that world. When they saw the world of Eternal Peace Empire, they were naturally happy at seeing a new prey. Desire to conquer rose in their hearts, and they didn't hesitate to even petrify their bodies to send themselves to eternal peace. However, what was weird was that after the stone statues of the devil gods passed through, they didn't try to execute an even larger sacrifice to open up the hole created by Earthquake Cauldron. Instead, they were searching around for something. Besides, it's such a huge hole, so why can't we see any devils coming through it? Qin Mu was puzzled. The Divine Flood Dragon King seemed to have discovered something, for he said, "Your Majesty, the army of the devils is on the sacrificial altar over there." Qin Mu looked in the direction, and his heart filled with fear. The slaves of the devil world were constructing a large sacrificial altar that was numerous times larger than the one he'd seen earlier. Its body was like a huge mountain shaved flat, and tens of thousands of devil wizards were floating around, using the blood of the slaves to paint various runes. Meanwhile, at the border of the sacrificial altar, the devil army was walking with grandeur toward the center. They had to be preparing to use the opportunity presented to them to send their army into eternal peace. Could it be that they can't cross this hole and have to rely on the power of blood sacrifice for their warriors to pass? Qin Mu stared blankly. He stretched his hand out to try to cross into the other world, but he met an invisible barrier. There was clearly another world in front of him, but he couldn't enter it. The Divine Flood Dragon King and the Dragon Chilean also tried it. The stronger they were, the stronger the resistance. They couldn't enter another's time and space. Suddenly, they heard a loud sound as though a heavy object had landed on the ground. It startled Qin Mu and the rest back to their senses. A devil god stone statue had been sent over from the world on the other side. The 300 yards tall stone statue stood quietly to their right, about 300 yards away. On its surface, wounds formed by fresh blood moved continuously and changed shape, gradually sinking into the stone. The statue suddenly twitched and slowly moved its body. It was evident that the wizards in the other world had used the slaves as blood sacrifices to give it the ability to move by itself. It's just that the devil gods still couldn't transfer their massive energy over, so the stone statues couldn't change back to their corporeal bodies. Quickly, go! The Divine Flood Dragon King immediately sprinted into the distance, circling the huge hole. Qin Mu stood on its back and looked behind them. He saw the stone statue bend down and crawl toward the earth. Its arms pushed into the earth like drills, and soon the whole stone statue went head first into the earth. In no time, there was no longer any sign of it having ever been there. This stone statue seems to be searching for something too. What is it exactly? Imperial Preceptor, Grandpa Blind, are they still all alive? If they are alive, where are they hiding? Qin Mu executed 9 Heaven's divine eyes and carefully searched for traces of Imperial Preceptor and the rest. As they continued to head north, he saw more signs of battle. There were marks left behind by Butcher and Blind as they fought the gods of high heavens. Divine Flood Dragon King, be careful. Qin Mu saw a black line that was staying still in the air, and the Divine Flood Dragon King stopped. He was slightly stunned as he also saw something wrong. He went around the black line. When his line of sight shifted, he saw the black line become wider. It was a knife light that had paused in the air. It had sliced apart space, but then got stuck. However, the power of the divine art in the knife didn't fade away, so the space couldn't heal. What a terrifying knife skill! The Divine Flood Dragon King couldn't help shivering. Such a knife skill could be known as a divine knife. When it reached the realm of Tao, it was invulnerable and extremely terrifying. Grandpa Butcher is heaven knife, and this is pig slaughtering knife skills. Qin Mu couldn't help exclaiming in astonishment. He had also learned pig slaughtering knife skills before, but he could never match Butcher's level. Butcher's knife was too wild. Even if other people learned his skills, it would be difficult for them to unleash their power. Only by becoming as crazy as Butcher could they unleash the power of his knife skills. Next, the group saw a sea of scorching flames smelting the mountains. Even the darkness found it difficult to consume that sea of flames. Grandpa Mute's furnace has been shattered. Qin Mu was astonished. The reason for the sea of flames was Mute's furnace. Once it shattered, the flames inside spilled out in all directions. Could Grandpa Mute have died? They crossed the sea of flames and Qin Mu suddenly saw old Rulai. He was sitting in a lotus position, with 20 heavens surrounding him. Gods and Buddhas of all sizes sat in his surroundings. Beside them was a god of high heavens, and the two men were facing each other. For a moment, Qin Mu was stunned, then sighed. He bowed at old Rulai and picked him up to bring him to the divine flood dragon king's back. They then continued on their way. Hu Linga turned her head back to ask curiously, "Young master, why is that old monk not moving and even need you to carry him?" Qin Mu shook his head and said, "He has already taken that god down with him." Hu Linga was stunned. Not long later, Qin Mu saw old Dao master. The old Daoist was clutching a sword technique with one hand and holding a sword with another. There was a celestial air to him as he stood with his head raised to look at the god who had pulled half of his body out from the mountain he had possessed. There was a smile on old Dao master's face. Divine light shot off from Qin Mu's eyes, and he saw that the heart of the god's brows had been pierced by a sword. The wound left behind was very fine and hard to notice. He looked at old Dao master and saw that his body was tattered. There were injuries everywhere, but they were no longer bleeding. "Is the old Daoist still alive?" Hu Linga asked. Qin Mu shook his head and walked down to bring old Dao master up while saying softly, "His blood ran out. His last attack must have changed his primordial spirit into a sword which he stabbed into the heart of that god's brows. His primordial spirit transformed into Dao after the stab and exploded with power, destroying itself as well. Once the power of the move was exhausted, the primordial spirit also dispersed. People who walk different paths cannot make plans together. Even though Heavenly Devil Cult and Dao Sect's paths were different, Qin Mu was still extremely respectful to this old Dao master. Hu Linga became solemn and straightened her clothes. She then bowed respectfully to old Dao master. A high-minded and righteous person in his old age, one with heart full of fierce passion. "Salute!" When the flood dragons saw this, they all stood up on their hind legs and cupped their claws together. "Maha!" They continued to walk forward until they saw a huge snake lying on the ground. It was Willow Immortal. The group saw less and less of the stone statues from the other world, but the atmosphere became more and more somber. The corners of Qin Mu's eyes wrinkled in fear of seeing the corpses of Cripple, Granny Sai, and the rest. He dragged Willow Immortal on the divine flood dragon king's back as well. Village chief said that there needed to be a person to collect the corpses. "Senior sister Willow Immortal, I'm here. Follow me home." They then saw White Immortal who was covered in silver-colored spikes upon which a ball of thread was tangled. He held a plate with silver needles in his hand. There was a huge hole in his chest, a hand still sticking out from it. He had to have killed his opponent and not expected him to still manage to take his life before succumbing to death. The surroundings were completely silent, with only mountain rocks floating in the darkness and fog. Qin Mu and the rest walked over, and a magnetic force under their feet seemed to vanish. There was a strange force field there, and Qin Mu raised his head to look at the stars. Great overarching heavenly stars. Granny, his heart couldn't help skipping a beat. Above them was the starry sky formed by great overarching heavenly stars palm force, and he saw Granny Sai sitting motionlessly in the starry sky. The beautiful woman had her palm stretched out as if she had just used her art. She looked magnificent. This video will end here.